For me, collectible design is a blend of emotion and intellect.
Pieces that have a piece of soul in them. I think that looking for a story, we're all looking for stories. And I think what good design does is it tells a story. And whether it's about a practice or whether it's a political statement, it tells a story.
So do you think there's this resurgent of interest in collectible design? I guess because we've gone through this whole mass market industrial, I'm saying that there's a little backlash on when people want a more handcrafted, artisanally something, story.
I feel people want to live with stories. Yeah, I think, there's so much generic work out there. And I think people really are looking for stories. And when you see a piece, and we see this, when you explain the reason behind a piece, or you explain the process, it just changes the way people look at something. And I think that's something that really defines collectible or any good design, really.
That's great. So I want to come back to Pinakin because both of you are in different, I guess, stages of your practice and evolution. So this is going to be an interesting conversation, I hope. So Pinakin, of course, has done many bespoke pieces and in his factory and particularly the swings, and you see this lovely store behind us. So what has made you go into opening a store called Collect, which is not just about collectible design, but I think also antiquities and other objects for the home, all of which are in the generic collectibles space?
Priya, this has come as the result of my own journey into art, design, collecting. And what happened is that when I used to go to art galleries and I used to see solo shows of artists and somebody had just painted black heads and didn't know what else to do, and I found white cubes a bit intellectually challenging, and, it gave me a complex because I didn't know how to go to the gallerist. Very rarely did the gallerist even know about it, but to even ask and say what is the artist trying to say, what is not trying to say. Then for years together, we had this battle going on between the gallerists and their entourage of artists and their tight art world, which had become so rational and so analytical about what is art and what is design, that they had drawn up a sort of boundaries in between, where they even took a person like Dashrath, who was India's first multidisciplinary artist, and said, oh no, he's not an artist because he's a designer. And to think that in the last 10 years, suddenly all this doesn't make sense and everybody's willing to accept the blurred space. I said, now, why not push for the aesthetic evaluation of things, what comes out of your upbringing, your own understanding of beauty, and jostle these things together, not in a format of a white cube. So I've created a sort of a flea market where there's antiquity, there's design, there's collectible, there's art, and it is a perfect point for young people to walk through and even have a meaningful conversation with each other or their interior design.
We'll come back to young people and collecting in a bit. But Puru, I've seen you since, I think, 20 years ago when you started off your furniture factory, and it's fantastic. And it's amazing to see the journey that you've come. So what has brought this change if now, I know you have a store in New York. Did that inform what you and Brian are doing now in your practice, and where do you think that sits in this?
Yeah, the store in New York has been, it's been a tremendous validation. What's been really exciting about it is I think it's allowed us to do a lot more original design. I think there's much more scope internationally, and I think there's a certain understanding of it. India will get there. We're already seeing it getting there. But yeah, I think part of establishing the store in New York has been sort of a real focus on design. Unfortunately, design has become a little bit like fashion in terms of there's a constant need to produce new collections. But I think it really has. And there is something tremendously exciting for me to have architects and designers whose coffee table books we've had forever now buying our designs to put in their projects. It's a bit like Ashish was talking about. That I think also gives you the confidence to focus a little bit more on your own design practice, and it forces that discipline into you. I think it's easy to sort of copy, but it's much harder to come up with things that are original, but it's important.
So what is your voice now? And, your new collection is rooted in India.
I think the one thing I feel is really important with any design is the idea that it needs to be it needs to have context. And I think the notion of sort of global sort of taste is so vague. And I think what we've really tried to do, both Brian and I, is realize and celebrate the fact that we are designing in India. So much of our design will either rely materially or technique-wise on an Indian craft or material. And I think we really like to explore that. But within that space, I mean, we need to be quite true to ourselves. We're not going to be making paisleys or even totems, I mean, that's not who we are. So the idea is to tap into these rich traditions. I mean, right now we're really obsessed with jewelry making. I think we're really interested in jewelry making, and the jewelry stone markets outside of Jaipur are just this like wonderland of materials. So we tend to pick from that. We'll pick from techniques that sort of range from dokra sort of sculpture to sort of old sand casting techniques. And then the idea is to try and update them and develop them both design-wise, but also I think what's really important is you need to kind of get the finish right. I think working internationally, and we're represented by a few galleries internationally, we have our own store internationally, is you kind of live and die on finish. And so your design can be as strong as it wants to be, but unless it's perfectly made, it seems pointless to state it, but it is so important. And I feel there's so many materials. In fact, the difficulty is kind of narrowing it down and editing yourself. So I think we've got a lot of furniture design left in us.
So Pinakin, what would you say for a young collector who's collecting design or any of the collectibles that you have in your store? How do you want them to approach it? Not just by having conversations. Should they have some sort of a price idea? Because, as I've talked with Ashish, I mean, sometimes when we do so much of, let's say, intervention and have this whole design journey and developing things, the pieces themselves become unaffordable to most people. So, I mean, I firmly believe that all design does not have to be expensive. So how would you, with your years of experience?
So I sort of can go back. Yes, to say the approach to collecting. I think it's like an approach to life. Unfortunately, a lot of the young people are sitting at home in their comfortable environment and planning out their life. This is when the date will turn into a relationship will turn into a marriage. This is where I'll have my career. This is what, I mean, and life is not so much about planning as it is about spontaneity. So the next time, you're in a gallery or if you're in a flea market, you're anywhere, and if there is something that's talking to you, you have to respond to it and seize the moment rather than worry about, because now you're looking at a collection, you're not looking at a functional object. So, you can analyze a sofa 10 times to see whether it fits your body language or not. But some work of art or design that you're drawn to, just get it, bring it home, and then find a space to put it after 2 months or 2 years. But the moment of growth comes in that experience. So I would say just jump into the deep end, fall in love. I mean, then everything else will happen. A handicraft fairs like a Paramparik Karigar comes into your town and you have the best of craft being offered to you. So go there, but make a beginning. Don't find excuses to say, when my house is being done, when I can afford more, I can do that. There are lots of things that you can push yourself into. And once you take that step, it's extremely rewarding because it becomes your hobby for the rest of your life.
So what was the first thing you collected, Pinakin?
First collected when I was 15 or 16. When I started collecting art, there were only 3 galleries in India, not in a city. So there was DeMuro in Delhi, which was pre-independence, and there was Kemold and Pandols in Bombay, right? The fashion industry hadn't acquired the label. So when I first met Abu and Sandeep in my store, which I didn't know what to call, because in those days I hadn't become a brand name, so I called it etc. So I could add etc. to it. And all these young designers that were growing around the space used to treat it like a Parisian cafe, and they used to come there and chat about how we had got permission from our parents to convert spaces and monetary influences into a sort of new direction altogether. So I'm saying that in those days when none of these definitions were clear, the best places to go to were flea markets. So I would end up going through Chor Bazaar. I would end up going through, the other Phul Gali. I mean, the markets are so rich, and they have been honed and honed by hundreds of years of experience, economic experience, social experience. They know that this lady will only buy this because she's Gujarati. So it was a safe space to collect.
Puru, what did you first collect in terms of design? What have you enjoyed collecting, or what do you look at?
Brian and I used to live right near where the flea market was in New York. Remember when Chelsea, the flower district, existed before Uber gentrification? So I think the first piece was probably one of the Eames plywood chairs, and we still have it, sort of almost 25 years later. And I think that's the thing. Still very useful. I think that's the thing with good design, right?
In your store, what type of design do you celebrate? Are you working and collaborating with young designers to showcase their pieces in terms of collective design?
I think it's the general opening up of the markets, of travel, of awareness building up that gets you out of your limited vision and opens up experiences. No? And I'm trying to sort of lay open all the terms and conditions to give the youngsters a bit of security, to say that I don't want to buy from you and mark it up 3 times and put it up as high design somewhere. That we are all starting a very democratic process of taking art and design laterally across to a wider audience. So let's sit openly and discuss what we can afford to give each other, but let's just get the scene before China and Dubai and Italy come and take us over.
Are you going to be opening a store back in Delhi NCR soon?
Well, we have a studio in Delhi, so we do work with clients from the studio in Delhi. Right now, we're also, we have a store in London, so we're sort of all over the place at the moment. I think we are, personally, Brian and I are just really busy sort of coming up with new collections that we will be launching in the fall in the US, and those will obviously be available here as well. But we collaborate a lot in India with architects and designers. I think what we're seeing, and what we've seen, I think, even in the last 5 years, is there's just been a much more, as Pinakin has said, a much more collaborative approach. And I think people realize that, the more voices you can get into a space, whether it's an interior, whether it's a piece of furniture, you actually do end up improving it.
So thank you very much. Thank you both. We look forward to seeing their stores, and please do go and have a look at what they have to show.